Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Tactical Leader. We have a episode of Tactical Friday today, and we are bringing back Jennifer Chapman to talk more about her leadership power tools. Jennifer, welcome back to the show.
Oh, great to be back. Thanks.
I am so excited about this because I love Tactical Fridays. Honestly, my favorite part of the podcast because we get to get a little bit more granular. We heard your amazing story, the things you do, how truly awesome you are in the space. But I really want to give the audience an opportunity to get more tactical with you. And you have an article called Leadership Power Tools. There's a much longer title attached to it. There are tips, there are tricks. Obviously, there are power tools attached to it. There's an opportunity for the audience to jump in on this, learn more about these power tools. Can we just unpack that a little bit for them and give them some insights about how to overall improve their leadership capabilities?
Absolutely. So, one thing I've noticed, I mentioned earlier, I tend to attract clients who are very self motivated and are just on their own doing what they can to improve themselves. And I have one client in particular who is always looking for the latest leadership book, and she just grabs it and reads it. A lot of people are listening to books on Audible, or you've got your favorite podcast, like, of course, the Tactical Leader podcast. And what's great is that you've got that energy around, I want to learn, I want to improve. But then what tends to happen is that all this information goes into our short-term memory. And literally by the next day, you can't articulate what you had listened to or read the day before. How many of you have gone to some kind of a training class, any kind of a training class in the last couple of years? And then ask yourself, how much did you actually implement from that training class? And I'd say, unless it was something that you directly do on the job, that your answer is going to be, yeah, I didn't really do anything with it. And that the key is listen to what I just said, unless you're actually doing it on the job. So, if my husband just took a training on a certain kind of engineering tool and he is now working with it, and that's such an important component of any training that you do. So I wrote this article, and yes, it's in a series of articles that are leadership power tools. And the first power tool is getting the most out of every leadership resource. And I just want, and I feel passionate about helping people just make the most out of your time, make the most out of your money. Some of you might currently be working with a coach. This article is going to help you. Those of you who are listening to podcasts, just across the board, it's going to have valuable ways that will get you from that short-term memory into your long-term memory, and then finally into the doing mode. And then the first step out of out of a series of 5, my first step, my key nugget here is you've got to get clear about what you want to learn. Just listening to a podcast because you like Zach's voice isn't going to really get you anywhere, except for becoming a Zach Knight fan, which, as honorable that is, we were hoping that you want to be seeing some change in your behavior and in your self-awareness into the kind of leader that you are. And so pause and ask yourself, what is it that I want to get out of these different resources that I'm engaging with? And one question that I like to ask my clients is, or actually not a question to ask, but phrase what you want to learn like a question. Like, how do I ... So it could be, how do I work with a poor performer? Or how do I get buy-in on my ideas at work? How do I position myself to move up the corporate ladder? Just think about what are the things on your mind and turn it into this how do I question. And now you've got something that's centering you on your journey of self-study. Now you know, okay, I'm going to target on that working with poor performance. I'm going to be looking for podcasts. I know Zach Knight is awesome. I'm going to go back through his archives and find when has he talked to people about working with poor performers. And I'm going to search and look, maybe there's some other podcasts. What Audible books are there out there? I know a neighbor who works and manages a large team. I'm going to talk to that neighbor and see what he does when he has a poor performer. And then that gets you into then step 2, where you're engaging with your resource. And I have a lot of tips for how to engage beyond just reading or beyond just having a conversation. And now you're just filling up your mind, and then the steps move you into how do you make that actionable.
What I find really interesting about all of this is something I'm guilty of, and I think a lot of people are guilty of. You go to these conferences, you read a book, you listen to a podcast, and you're lacking the intentionality behind your desired end state, which is what you're really talking about. You're not being intentional about learning. You're just doing it because it's learning and you feel it kind of like checks the block, more or less, right? You go to a conference, you take 18 pages of notes, then put that notebook away till you go to the next conference, right? And you don't ever take action steps. One thing that I've done is the first 2 pages, I always write the action takeaways. What am I going to do leaving this conference? And I'll flip it, and then I'll take notes for the speakers. Then I'll go back to, if there's a nugget, what am I going to implement? Right. Is there a tip that you found that really helps in that regard of like, how do you create that intentionality behind learning? And I know this is a big piece of what you're talking about in the article. What would you recommend for people?
I recommend that you be mindful of how you learn. Some people learn audibly, some people learn visually, some people are learning while they're doing. And so I would say to for the visual learners, you're going to, yes, absolutely take notes, because as you're listening and writing and having something for your eyes to look at, that absolutely is going to increase the likelihood you're going to remember. And I love your tip, Zach, of having that action sheet at the beginning. And what I do from there is, if you end up with like a whole page of actions, then at the end of the conference, I'd go back and say, pick 2 of all these things. What would have the most impact? And that's also true, by the way, when people come to me and say, okay, here are the 5 things I want to work on in coaching. I find that out of that list of 5, there's usually one that if we work on that one first, that's going to take care of 3 out of the 5 on that list. So it's just really, and so then whether it's writing or, like I said, the audio. So some of you are going to prefer the podcasts. So maybe writing isn't going to be effective for you, but then you can use the pause feature. Pause, you hear something and go, wow, that was a really profound comment, or I needed to hear that. Pause, think for a second, rewind it a little bit and listen to that part again. And don't feel like you just have to listen to a podcast from point A to point B and there you go. Engage with the audio. And then for those of you who learn kinesthetically or learn while you're doing something, instead, so I know it's like a go-to for people to listen to podcasts while they're driving, for example. That unfortunately does not count as a kinesthetic thing, because let's face it, most of us drive on autopilot. So I would encourage you to listen to a podcast while you're going for a walk, while you're folding laundry, while you're changing the oil in the car, whatever it might be. Have some kind of an action that you're doing besides driving that will help you be able to listen and engage while you're getting your body involved to remember it that way.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me the way people learn, because I always heard it as you have those people that are, or I guess this might be like a thinking process. They think in their shower thinkers, shower learners, driving, or sleeping, where they think of something in the middle of the night, right? And they have to have a notebook by their bed. I've always been a driver. What you just said, I'm so guilty of. I'll throw a podcast on in the car. In Atlanta here, we have an hour and a half commute anywhere you go. So it's like, it's such a great opportunity to turn your vehicle into a classroom. But if you don't take notes, I do voice to text. So I'll do like a voice memo. Hey, make sure I recognize. And then what I like to do is, you see, I have books right here in my background. I'll usually buy a hard copy and the Audible copy so I can go back and like highlight those sections, right? I think that part is like huge. You have to be very intentional if you're going to listen to stuff, to also be in a position to take some sort of note, whatever that may be. Otherwise, you're going to lose that knowledge. And, we only retain what, 10, 20% of what we hear, anyways. So it turns into, you're really not retaining anything ever if you're not being intentional about it. So I love that tip. Absolutely. I want to transition into giving the audience an opportunity again to recognize your awesomeness, how great you are, everything you're doing with Ambition Leadership. What is the best way for them to connect, reach out, be a part of everything you're doing? I know this article we talked about, there's a great key for them. Can you give us the best way to connect and get all this content from me?
Yes. So you're going to text accelerate, ACCELERATE, to 411321. That's accelerate. You're going to text that to 411321, and then you should immediately get a response, and it'll give you some next steps for how to easily get this article I mentioned right to your inbox. And I would love to give everybody a copy of it. There's no obligation, not trying to sell anything with this article. I just truly want people to have this resource so that you're making the most of everything you're trying to do to be a better person and a better leader. So again, it's 411321. You're going to text the word accelerate.
And of course, beyond that, you have ambitionleadership.com, where you have just a litany of different content, articles, aspects of coaching that they can find out more about. But I definitely encourage everybody, text it to Jennifer, find out more about her, be a part of what's happening, because I think this is so important, so key. And overall, Jennifer, I just want to thank you for everything you've put out there for us today and all the amazing wisdom you've brought to the show.
Thank you. And thank you for your tips. And next time I go to a conference, I'm excited to have my blank page at the beginning. That's so smart.